This is the Askar 71F flat field refractor, and in my opinion, it's a very portable and beginner-friendly telescope for astrophotography. You don't need to use an additional component like a field flattener, nor do you need to spend hours upon hours trying to dial in your back focus to get round stars. And at a focal length of 490 millimeters, it's perfect for framing up those popular emission and reflection nebulae, as well as medium-sized galaxies like the Triangulum. And, you know, at a price point of $600 US, some would say that's also pretty attractive. In this review, we're going to check out everything that this telescope came with. Then we'll dive into the features and specs and assess the pros and cons. And then we will see how this little dude performed optically. And then at the end of this video, I will be sharing a final process image that I took using this telescope. All right, party people, I'm Sarah Matthews, and as always, grab a snack and let's jump into it. When the Askar 71F first came out, it immediately caught my eye because of its ease of use, its super cute and compact form factor, of course, its ideal focal length of 490 millimeters, and its very competitive price point. So I think all of those variables taken together, or even alone, helps to check a lot of boxes for a lot of different people. And so I was compelled by the specs alone that I reached out to Sharpstar Optics to see if I could review this telescope. And here we are, months later, with my review. And they, of course, have no say over the content of this video, and as with any review that I ever do, my hope is that it just genuinely helps you in your journey, wherever that it is that it takes you. So, who is this telescope for? Whose boxes are being ticked? Well, I thought really long and hard about this, and I kind of came up with 3 different groups. And there are, of course, different outliers, and maybe you could make like 4 groups of people, but for now we're going to stick to just 3 groups, because 3 is a pretty easy number. So the first group of people would be anybody who is looking for their first deep space astrophotography telescope. And the second group would be somebody who has been doing astrophotography with a camera lens and has been wanting to make the switch to using a telescope. Because I think for those first 2 groups, the Askar is really this, no-nonsense telescope. It comes with everything that you would need to get started. It's rings, adapters, you don't have to worry about using a field flattener, you don't have to worry about dialing in precise back focus adjustments. It's just very easy to use. And the reason being, in part, is because the Askar 71F is a quadruplet telescope design in that there are 3 glass elements in the front here, like a triplet refractor, which are usually highly coveted for their color correcting abilities. But with a quadruplet like this, there is another lens element in the back here, built in, to help flatten out the field of view so you get those nice round stars throughout your entire field of view. All of that taken into consideration, the fact that it is all $600 US, again, for a quadruplet with this focal length, I think is very, very compelling. And speaking of focal length, that's where I think this might be a good fit for another group of people. And you might be part of this group. So let's say you have something like the RedCat 51 or some other similar wide-angle telescope. I think that if you've been looking for something with a little bit more reach, but not something like over 1,000 millimeters where you would potentially have to upgrade your mount and start using an off-axis guider, but just something that's still portable and has a really nice middle-of-the-road focal length with just a bit more reach than what you already have, I think this telescope would be for you. Because the 490 millimeter focal length is really nice with a lot of different types of camera sensors in terms of sampling and resolution, but also in terms of just framing and field of view. So if you wanted to use this telescope with like an APS-C size sensor, it looks really nice when you frame up the Orion Nebula or the Horsehead Nebula or the Eagle Nebula or the Tarantula Nebula and even the Andromeda Galaxy, as well as, the Triangulum Galaxy. Now, does this have a focal ratio of f6.9? Yes. Do I think that is an issue? No, especially with these types of targets that are already pretty bright. But if you wanted something a little bit faster, you could get the optional 0.75x reducer, which would bring the focal ratio down to f5 and make the focal length 306 millimeters. Another thing that's really interesting, though, about this quadruplet design is that you can actually observe with it during the day and at night, and it comes with some accessories to help you out on that front. So let's dive into everything that this telescope came with. So it of course came in a box. Yours would also come in a box. It just wouldn't be this box because that would be kind of quantum-y. So the first thing that I will, of course, take out is the telescope. And then we have some more boxes over here, which I wonder what those could be. We have this box. It is a prism. It's a 45-degree prism, and it's a 1 1/4 inch. So when I was talking about how you can use this for visual either during the day, you know, for like birding if you'd like, or looking at the mountains out in the distance, or at nighttime, here you go. Okay, moving on now to another box. This box, in fact. And it is an 8mm eyepiece with some caps. What else could this be? Huzzah! Another box. It is, have any guesses? All right, you already know what it is. It's a 20mm eyepiece. So yes, the Askar CP Plausible 20mm eyepiece. Very nice. Okay, there's more stuff in here, so behold. It's this like weird thing. Is it a candy dish? No. Or I guess it could be if you wanted it to be. It's actually a photo adapter. Okay, sorry, my cat, of course, needs to come in. In, you heathen. All right, we're back now. So this is a photographic adapter, as they are calling it. But it's basically a way for us to attach our cameras. So if you have a DSLR or mirrorless camera or a dedicated astronomy camera, you should be able to use this. This kind of reminds me of like the PHQ series, where it comes with like different imaging adapters, which is nice. And I also found a few other items under everything in this larger plastic bag here. We have a quality assurance checklist, always great to have. We have a physical manual, and it comes in a couple different languages. You can also download the manual online as well in a PDF version on the Sharpstar website under the Askar 71F website page. We also have a card for the 1-year warranty, which is awesome. It's something that I don't think is talked about a lot. And we also have some stickers, and we also have this other little bag within the bag. This is for the focuser. It's the tension screw focuser knob, and we will install that a little bit later. The other little screw that I showed you earlier is actually for the prism to make sure that the eyepiece stays in place. All right, now let's dive into the features and specs a little bit more. So starting with the overall aesthetic of the Askar 71F, it is absolutely giving me very strong Blue Power Ranger vibes, which I'm deeply grateful for, because what an awesome rock solid show that was. So between the electric blue anodized accents and the matte black components, and just the overall kind of glossy finish to the white lens tube, I really think they hit this out of the park. So 10 out of 10 for me with the aesthetics. So kind of getting more into the overall build quality and the mechanics, the lens tube itself is made out of aluminum. It was CNC machined, and it feels really well made. It's high quality. It's still lightweight, but not flimsy at all feeling. It's very durable feeling is what I'm trying to get at. On its own, just the lens tube itself without these rings here and these other accessories, it's 2.5 kilograms, but with everything else attached, the gross weight is 3 kilograms. Then moving up here to the dew shield. Dew shields are really nice because they help to minimize stray light, for example. So if you have a nearby street light, for example, just pop this open and it should help quite a bit. And then we also have some markings here where it says Askar 71F flat field. So we have it here and then on the other side here, which you can't see, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. All in all, with the dew shield collapsed like this and the visual back adapters here, the Askar 71F is 372.5 millimeters, or 14.67 inches. So to extend the dew shield, we just need to loosen up this locking screw here. As you extend it, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's kind of like this silky smooth velvety sound feeling, if that makes sense. And so everything stays in place really well. So with the dew shield fully extended like this and the visual back adapter here, the Askar 71F is 430.9 millimeters, or 16.9 inches. Now in front of the dew shield, we have a lovely lens cap, and it also reads Askar 71F. Now a notable difference between this scope and some of Askar's other scopes, this lens cap here is not made out of the same material as you see here, this anodized aluminum, which is okay. It's just kind of something that I wanted to point out, which I would expect is because of the kind of more budget price point, but it still works great because on the inside, We have some felt lining, which keeps it nice and securely in place. And the outer dimensions, in case you wanted to get a Botnev mask, is 93.2 millimeters or 3.66 inches. And which reminds me that the tube itself here is 87.6 millimeters or 3.44 inches. So if you wanted to get a dew strap, you would want to make sure that the dew straps would fit with those dimensions. Inside the dew shields up to these markings, it appears to be lined with some really nice velvety felt material. And as I mentioned, this telescope has a 3+1 design. So there are 3 lenses up here, 1 lens in the back. There is 1 lens in the middle of the 3 lenses that is called an extra dispersion glass. So it helps with color correction or chromatic aberration or fringing, because color correction is really important when it comes to deep space astrophotography. And then on the back here, we of course have that extra lens that is helping to correct for the field curvature. Otherwise, if it was just a triplet refractor, you would need that extra field flattener or field flattener reducer to flatten everything out so you get pinpoint round stars throughout the entire field of view, which would then necessitate you to have to worry about back focus. So if you do want to use the reducer, you are going to have to then consider the precise back focus adjustments for that specific reducer. And one last thing I wanted to note, the lenses are air spaced, for those of you who care whether they're oil spaced or not. All right, now we're gonna move on to these rings here. Something that I really appreciate about Sharpstar or Askar, whatever, is that they always think through what, from a user perspective, can I do to make this a better experience for the end user. They're like really good at making user stories. If you've ever been in software development and you've had to do, sprint planning and you're like, I need to make user stories. So as a user, I want to have this feature, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, yeah. Sorry if you don't know what I'm talking about. That was weird. But anyways, yeah, with these clamshell rings, it's nice because you don't have to use an additional tool to open up these rings. Everything is just, controlled basically by these little locking screws here. So all we have to do is open them up. And on the inside, we have kind of like this nice kind of soft black material to help make sure that you're not going to hurt any of the finishing of the tube. But what's nice is that you can easily move the telescope upwards or backwards, depending on how you want to balance the overall OTA, which is nice for any type of mount. But I think it's especially nice for harmonic mounts where you're not usually kind of balancing things in the normal way that you would with kind of these worm gears. So it's nice just to be able to move things back and forth. And also if you wanted to orient the telescope in any sort of different way, like have the focuser up here, you could do that as well. One thing that is really scary about using clamshell rings though is the fact that if they're not securely in place, then everything would fall out, and that would be less than ideal, I think, for most parties. But the fact that there are 2 helps because at least you don't have just a single point of failure. So I would always just recommend just doing a nice little light tug where you just like pick this up and, do something with it. So speaking of picking things up, let's talk about this handlebar here, or semblance of a handlebar for some people. So this is what we are coining, or they have coined, a multifunctional handlebar, because you are supposed to be able to pick this up. But I have pretty small hands as it is, but if I have any amount of like sodium or more sodium than I should, then I like blow it up, and trying to, put my hands through here is just a non-starter. So if you have like normal sized hands, then this is probably not going to be a multifunctional handlebar. It's simply just going to be somewhere you can put your guide scope or any other type of accessory like a mini PC or ASIR or whatever other type of accessory that you would like to put on here. Now, moving up to the top here, we have a blue anodized Cinta-style finder base plate here that is mounted to the top of the rings with these 2 socket head screws. It's 110 millimeters or 4.33 inches in length. The open slit here is nice because if you wanted to move these closer, you could absolutely do that. Or if you wanted to use this for some other sort of setup, you could do that because there's some flexibility because of that slit. And there are 5 different screw holes here, which is nice because depending on the type of accessory you have and where you want to place it, you do have a lot of flexibility in that regard. And then it also comes with these 2 locking screws as well. And the screws themselves have a lot of length to them. So if your accessory kind of is a little bit smaller, you should still be good. The holes themselves do appear to be pretty well machined, similar to other Askar scopes that I have reviewed, and the handlebar, and same with the screws themselves. It's kind of just their general screws for something like this. All right, now we're going to move down to the bottom here. And we have our dovetail. It's a 230mm dovetail, which is nice. And we have these kind of two slits here. So if we needed to move these rings along the slits, we could do that. We could bring them closer together. We could extend them further apart. Always nice to have those options. And in the middle here, we have two screws. We have a 1/4 inch screw, and then we have a 3/8 inch screw. So whatever type of tripod that you would like to use with this for daytime observing, for example, it's already ready to go. Something that's a little bit different about this specific Vixen style dovetail bar with regard to other Askar scopes is that it's not made out of the same kind of anodized color or anodized material that you would normally see in some of their other scopes. So that is just something I wanted to call out. Now moving up to the top here on top of the focuser, we have two Cinta style finder bases, and they're really cute because they're really small. And we have some socket head screws. We have two socket head screws for both where they're mounted to the top, and we have a screw hole here and a screw hole here, and it comes with a screw for each side. So if you wanted to, mount a finder scope here, you could do that. If you wanted to mount something else like a guide scope or again like a PC or a power box, you could definitely do that here. And of course, if you wanted to remove them for whatever reason, again, just take like an Allen key and you'd be good to go. Now, let's move on to the focuser. So one of the nice things about this focuser is that if you wanted to use an electronic autofocuser, like from ZWO, like the one in this box here, you could definitely do that and you wouldn't have to buy all these additional attachments, and it's really easy to install. You would just need to move the telescope down a little bit so that the bracket, the installation bracket that would go under here would fit under here. Because otherwise, if this is too close to the dovetail bar, you would be running into an issue, quite literally. But this focuser works really well on its own if you're just going to be using it manually. If you are going to be using it manually, go ahead and take out the little M4 screw that came in that little plastic bag that contained the warranty, the quality assurance checklist, all that. And then that is going to be, of course, the tension screw for the focuser, and then you're going to want to install it right here. And then, of course, you're going to want to release this if you are trying to actually use the focuser. But if you are going to be using an EAF, then you don't need to use this thumb screw. If you are going to be using it manually, we have these two coarse adjustment knobs, one right here and one right here. This is a rack and pinion 2.4 inch rack and pinion focuser. So again, we have the coarse adjustment knobs here, and then we have the fine adjustment knob here, and they're very responsive to the focuser. You might hear a little bit of squeaking sound, so it's not awful, especially for the cost of this, but I haven't had any issues with it. There hasn't been any slippage, which is really nice. And just so you can kind of see that rack and pinion, it's right here. So those teeth help to cut down on backlash. Also, the focuser extends 40mm, and we have these graduation markings. So if you are old school like myself and you're not using it with an electronic autofocuser, these markings are helpful because it helps you to remember maybe like where your last focus point was, depending on which camera or filter you're using. Something else, we have some more graduation marks here, and this is actually for the 360-degree rotator, camera angle rotator. So I have a locking screw here, so if I just unlock it, and the locking screw has some great knurling as well, it's very similar to this one here. I can just move this all about. And it's really helpful with creating mosaics, or if you just want to remember where your camera angle placement was, if you had to detach your camera for whatever reason, or if you're looking for a very specific rotation angle that you saw from, somebody's image somewhere else. But overall, with the focuser and the camera rotator, they both feel really smooth in their adjustments. They both keep their place, which is really nice. I haven't had any issues with them. Now here on the back, we have some visual back adapters. So we have two visual back adapters. We have a 1 1/4 inch visual back adapter and a 2 inch visual back adapter. So if we wanted to install this prism here, we would just need to loosen this screw here, take out the dust cap, and then just tighten it in place. Ta-da! And then you could take your eyepieces, or one of your eyepiece, or one of the eyepieces that it comes with, and then and you would be good to go. And so if you wanted to use a 2 inch diagonal or prism, you could do that as well. We would just need to remove the 1 1/4 inch prism here. And then to remove the 1 1/4 inch visual back adapter, we just need to loosen all three of these screws. And similar to the 1¼ inch visual back adapter, there's a compression ring in here. So here is the 1¼ inch visual back adapter. And then of course you would just want to secure the 2-inch prism in there. Now to image with this scope, it's fairly easy. We just need to remove the visual back adapter by unthreading it. And then we have our photographic adapter. So what's nice about this photographic adapter is instead of it coming in multiple components like some of the past Askar scopes, it's all welded together, I guess you could say, or just manufactured together. And there are threads here on the outside that match the inside here of the telescope, and you just simply put it in here. So we have kind of 3 adapters. We have M64 to M54, then we have M54 to M54, and then we have M54 to M48. But in between the M54 and M48 adapter is a place for 2-inch filters with threads in them. It can be sometimes a little bit difficult to get them in or out without getting fingerprints on your filter, so I would recommend just, being very, very careful. Most cameras are going to come with the adapters that you would need to attach it to the back of this scope here. So while you don't have to worry about precise back focus adjustments from a flattener, for example, or a focal reducer, you do need to at least make sure that your camera can reach focus, which is usually 55 millimeters anyways, and they come with all the adapters that you would normally need to attach it to the back here. So that's usually a 21 millimeter spacer ring as well as a 16.5 millimeter spacer ring with these ZWO cameras. And so you would just add those to the front and then you would be good to go. So it's really just more about your camera being able to achieve focus because, for example, with a DSLR, you would need a little adapter here, AT adapter, to mount to the front here, and that would give you 55 millimeters from here to the camera sensor so that you can achieve focus. So that's how you attach everything. You have your visual back adapters, and then you of course also have your imaging modes. With the imaging modes, you do have room for spacing. You just need to make sure that depending on which adapter that you do use from the photographic adapter, that you're mindful of how much spacing that you can be using. So I will list those on the screen. So here it's more of a range that you have to be aware of and not so much a precise measurement to ensure that you get round stars because that's already taken care of with the built-in corrective elements inside of the lens tube. We're actually going to be focusing on just, getting our camera in focus, which has more to do with the actual mechanics of the lens tube itself and the focal plane of the lens tube itself. Now, in terms of overall weight, you could use this with any number of mounts, like the AM3 or a comparable mount. You could even use the AM5N if you wanted to use that, or one of Skywatcher's new mounts, or any of the other, like the harmonic mounts. I have been using this with the AM3 and AM5N with no issues whatsoever. So anything comparable to that, I can for sure tell you that this will work just fine. So now let's get into how the telescope performed optically. All right, so now let's get into the optical review. So I tested this telescope mostly with the ASI 2600 MC Pro one-shot color dedicated astronomy camera here. It is an APS-C size sensor. So while testing this telescope, I was looking for a couple of different things. For one, vignetting, which is darkening around the corners. And then I was also looking for color correction. So that would be chromatic aberration. So I want to make sure that is correcting any sort of diffraction with those wavelengths of light, not all coming back together into white light. So if we see any fringing around bright stars or areas of high contrast, then we would know that most likely that is either on-axis or off-axis chromatic aberration. So this is why I used a one-shot color camera. I didn't use any filters or anything in the imaging train. This camera has 3.76 micron sized pixels, so they are fairly small. And then when you pair that with the 490 millimeter focal length, you do get some nice imaging scale at 1.5, so that we can actually more accurately see if we are seeing color fringing. And then of course, we were looking for field flatness. So how well does the telescope live up to its name in providing a flat field of view with round stars throughout the entire field of view? So we are here in PixInsight. If you're not familiar with what PixInsight is, it's an astronomy software processing tool, so you can do pre-processing and post-processing, a whole bunch of fun stuff. So we're going to start off with a single sub of a broadband target that was pretty high up in the sky. I would like to preface that I am imaging in a 7 to 8 Bortle sky, so it's not great for broadband targets, but this will at least give us color accuracy in terms of the stars. So I'm going to open up this image. This is of M101. Again, it was pretty high up in the sky for when I was imaging it, and the sub is 30 seconds long at a gain of 100, and it is in a linear state, that's why it's black. We haven't stretched the image, and it is raw, so I've only debayered it. So I'm opening up the screen transfer function process, and I'm going to just give it an auto stretch, and it's green. I'm going to unlink the colors by clicking on this little dude here. What I'm looking for is just anything that stands out immediately, but so far, nothing bad. So because it wasn't perfectly at the zenith, I of course have some darkening here at the edges, but that's not a big deal. That's just something that I would expect to see anyways. And then we have these dust motes here, which is because I didn't calibrate any of these images with flats, which makes sense because they're raw. So yeah, nothing super stands out to me. The stars look pretty good. So with this star in the middle here, just about, I don't see any issues with color fringing, which is excellent. And then just kind of scooting over, I still am not getting any issues with color fringing, which is great. I will show a stacked image of a few more subs later on, but so far the stars look really good from the center. So here I am like at the very bottom right-hand corner, and the stars are very, very circular, which is great. That's what we'd want. And here at the bottom, that looks good. So I'm just gonna show you a stacked image with 2 minutes and 30 seconds worth of data. I use the fast integration tool for this. So at the center, kind of, no noticeable differences really, no chromatic aberration that I can see. You can see the center of the galaxy. I don't know if I said this already, but M101 is the Pinwheel galaxy. Yeah, I mean, no issues with any chromatic aberration that I can see. And again, yeah, this darkening is just from where it was in the sky and the light pollution that's coming from the city that I live near. But yeah, stars look awesome. I'm super impressed. I mean, this is like pretty much to the corner with like no issue. Yeah, like, I mean, look at this bright star over here. No issue. That's cool. So the next few images that I'm going to show you are me testing this telescope to kind of its extremes, as well as the combination with different camera sensors. And one thing that happens with a lot of different telescope designs and just a lot of telescopes in general are issues with bright stars, whether they are halos around the bright stars or just some like weird type of artifact going on. So this is of Arcturus, which is the fourth brightest star. So I think it's like a negative 0.3 magnitude star, so it's like very, very bright. And at the time, it was pretty high up in the sky, and so that's why I wanted to image it. And so, yeah, I mean, the star field looks really good. I don't see any issues with the stars at all, just at this scale. So we have lots of very tight focused stars here. I don't see any issues with chromatic aberration. They're all looking really good. And again, this is a 30-second sub, but I don't see any issues with chromatic aberration at all. I mean, yeah, everything looks really good. The stars are really round all the way to the edge. So because I'm not seeing any issues with this APS-C sensor, even at the very corners, I'm gonna go and say that if you're using a full frame, you're probably gonna be just fine, because I think you would really start to notice them, elongated stars, pretty far in, if there was going to be an issue with the field flatness. So far so good, even with this. But now I'm going to show you, let's go to script. Oh, just kidding. Let's go to image analysis, aberration inspector. So again, just testing this kind of telescope camera combo to its limits with a very, very, very bright star. There are usually artifacts with bright stars, and so with Arcturus here, we do see some mare here with these kind of weird, I don't know, lines. So I reached out to Sharpstar about this, and they think this is because I wasn't using an UV IR cut filter, but the 2600 does have an IR filter in front of it but you know, maybe the transmission wasn't high enough and we're still kind of seeing some of that here, because again, I wasn't using a narrowband filter or anything. But yeah, I thought this was interesting. I'm not sure exactly how you would correct for this, but they did suggest using a UV IR cut filter. But yeah, just like this, you don't see anything, and I don't think a lot of people would just be imaging a very, very large bright star like this anyways. And most of the time, if there is a bright star, it's usually obscured by some amount of dust. But another thing I do want to show you is with this telescope paired with the ASI 533 MC Pro. So what you're kind of seeing here with this flower type effect is called micro lens effect. And it's basically from these little lenses that are around the pixels. And this happens every once in a while with some camera telescope combinations based off of their focal length and focal ratio and just the camera sensor itself. But I was not using a UV IR cut filter with the 533 MC Pro, which is highly recommended. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that to your guys' awareness. Micro lensing effect does happen. But at the end of the day, I really like to look at the final images to see just how well you were able to image with this telescope. And so one of the targets that I was imaging for a longer amount of time than just the initial test that I showed you was the Lagoon Nebula here. I used the ASI 2600 MC Pro with the SV220 filter. It's a dual narrowband filter letting in HA and O3. And this is just a single sub at 5 minutes. I was using the AM5N, I think, or I was using the AM3. I was kind of swapping between the two. I never saw really any issues with any of the data that I was collecting from this target or any of the other targets with the narrowband filter. Again, the stars look just fine all the way throughout. I do have like a massive gradient, but that's from the nearby city. So that's a 5-minute sub. This is the final master light. This is not the final process image, but again, just gradients. But you know, for 5 hours and 55 minutes in a Bortle 7.8, I don't think that's too bad. So here is my final process image of the Lagoon Nebula M8. And if you'd like to download the master light file along with other data that I have on my Patreon site, you can do so by joining as a Patreon member, and I super appreciate all of your support. All right, guys, I hope you found this review helpful, and until the next video, I hope you all have clear skies.